When we take a deeper journey into the evidence that supports the communication by Elonias, we start to see examples of his message everywhere. In the years to follow, we saw constant evidence arising through our research, revealing the function of what we knew to be a program. The holographic model of the universe is widely accepted by many leading physicists, and yet it is still not discussed openly in everyday schools, news, or life itself, undoubtedly for fear of its implications and ramifications. But this message is not for everyone, and there is nothing to fear. If you were in a dream that would not end, wouldn't you want to wake up? You have been asleep for too long, and the real is waiting for you. Waking up to the illusion of this reality is the most wonderful experience I could ever wish for anyone. Some, however, can find it disconcerting at first, but I ask you, would you rather be asleep? When one wakes up to illusion, one begins to see the workings of the program in everyday life. Perhaps the most compelling nature of the holographic model is the nature of a hologram itself, which reflects the greater and the lesser of all things. Where one fractional aspect of a hologram contains the information of the whole. Patterns repeat themselves in precise mathematical ways and in our lives. We see reflections of this in ratios and formulas such as the Fibonacci sequence and the mathematics of pi. But there is no greater representation of the nature of a program than in the clearly illustrated, ever-repeating, formulated, and never-changing nature of fractals. I want to talk about patterns because they are a very important part of recognizing whether you are in a time loop or have taken a new pathway away from the past. The patterns you observe in your life are your greatest indicator of your pathway. A fractal is a geometric figure in which each part has the same statistical character as the whole. It is a never-ending pattern. They are created by repeating a simple process over and over again. Fractals are used in modeling structures in which simple patterns reoccur at progressively smaller scales. They describe phenomena like crystal growth, fluid turbulence, and galaxy formation. When we look back at the GZK cutoff experiment and the similarities between Bohm's explicate and implicate order of things and a computer system, it is not surprising that fractals also have applications in computer graphics and animation. If we truly begin to understand the powerful awareness given by the greater energies that have spoken, we realize how this is reflected in the holographic and fractal nature of our reality. Just as we see complex geometry and intricate mathematics in the deeper implicate order of reality, we should also expect to see simplistic versions of these very same formulas and fractal patterns in our everyday lives. But what would these look like? They would be all around us, hidden in plain sight, forming the very nature of our everyday lives without us even being aware. They would be so obvious we would immediately dismiss them because they seemed so normal and familiar. But why? Why would they seem that way? Why do numbers, music, mathematics, the days of the week, months and years, seasons, oceans, continents, even cosmology, all display repeating number patterns? Does the fundamental shape of a triangle also manifest in a common adage across the world that things happen in threes? Why is it said there are 6 degrees of separation between every single human being on Earth when our dimensional reality is best represented as a cube with 6 sides covering all possible directions relative to the source? Why are there 88 constellations in the night sky, and one of the most famous constellations of all, the Orion constellation, has 88 stars. On its own, it may appear as coincidence, but the deeper you dig, the more patterns you find. Why is it the third largest constellation in the night sky, Ursa Major, contains the star pattern called the Big Dipper, containing 7 stars, and the Little Dipper, the brightest star of the Ursa Minor constellation, is also made up of 7 stars, and reflects the very same shape both in actual cosmology and mythical ideology. We must consider the nature of fractal reality where there are no exceptions. Ursa Minor is a smaller fractal example of its larger counterpart, Ursa Major. There are no coincidences, remember that. There are only patterns. And if we look again at one of the nearest star clusters to Earth, we have the Pleiades, again 7 stars. The odds against these occurring randomly are nonsense, and impossible even by the standards of quantum mechanics. The very same laws that allow you to have a cup of coffee in the morning determine your reality to be false. I encourage you to not accept anything as just the way it is. In addition to cosmology, have you ever wondered why we have 7 days of the week? Why we have an ancient reference to the 7 seas? Why there are 7 major continents? And why, as part of our perception of reality, we see 7 colours in a rainbow or through a prism? The energy body has 7 chakras, and a byte of computer code counts its bits from 0 to 7. Why do we default to 7 wonders of the world when there are so many more? It would be so easy to simply dismiss or justify such things, but the deeper we look, the wider we look, the more we see. Even if we shrugged it all off as history, ancient civilizations, stars, moons, months and seasons, superstition, religion and more. Why? Why did the creative minds of the people and cultures who gave us these legacies think the way they did? Why has it become history? Why indeed? Because consciousness and outer reality are parts of each other in a holographic, fractal-based reality, based on patterns and levels of energy throughout all of time. And perhaps the most important reference of this modern era of the value of 7 is in the one you use every day, probably without even knowing it. It might be in your hand right now, or sitting in front of you on a desk. It is your computer device, your phone, your TV or your tablet, and it is called the OSI model. The OSI model is the basis for all computer technology to function as a device we can use in our everyday life. The OSI model sees 7 specific layers of operations and interactions that make the technology of today possible. From the atomic basis of electricity through to computer code and ultimately the user interface. 7 layers. Again. Of course, 7 is not the only repeating pattern. Far from it. One of the most brilliant human minds humanity has ever had the privilege to embrace is Nikola Tesla, the man responsible for virtually the entire emergence of electricity and electronic communications technology we use today. Tesla is famously quoted as saying, "If you only knew the magnificence of the 3, 6 and 9, you would have the key to the universe." He observed what he called divine codes, some of the most crucial behaviours of the program of life and energy, all mathematical, all geometric, all formulated, all part of a program. And so, number and geometry patterns intersect with your life and your reality every day in so many ways. They form the basis for our consciousness, our relationships, our energy, and our experiences. Truth can be observed when one's mind is open. a closed mind rejects first without becoming aware of the question. The more you open your mind and the more you look, the more you realize even references such as 777 and 666 have a far different meaning than the vague ideologies and fear-based narratives construed by religion. Even the repeating patterns found within our own chromosomal DNA pattern are also found within the time coordinates of so many historical aspects of life, from history through to numerology. Throughout our physical world, the everyday practical components of our life, science, cosmology, technology, navigation, theology, and mythology, they all share the common principles of number sequences. They all share the permutations of code or the conversion of fact to fiction, whether it be the congruent observations of what is considered to be the natural world or our own scientific formulas we create to understand it. All are parts of the whole system, lesser formulas in a greater whole. So it is too easy to dismiss these as coincidence. These patterns are not simply just the way it is, or the way it has always been. Number sequences should not occur at all in a natural state. They can only occur in an environment governed by artificial values and equations to control them. They are evidence of our existence within a program, because programs follow formulas and coding mechanisms. When placed into a holographic environment, these mechanisms reflect the whole into each of its parts. I say to you, if you never take the opportunity to take a new look at your reality and at yourself, then your perception of reality will never ever change. To make a conscious shift of awareness is to allow a new program of awareness to come into view within you. After what we have just seen, you may not now be surprised with the next example of a program reality representing itself through our everyday life. It is one of the most fundamental methods of understanding shapes and their relationships that make up our world. It is called Euclidean geometry. You may not recognize the name, but you most certainly will have seen it in school or may use it at work. It has been an everyday reality for over 2,000 years. Euclidean geometry is a system of plane geometry that follows mathematical relationships to create the solid geometry of 3 dimensions. Euclidean geometry determines relationships that lead to the everyday mathematics known as algebra and number theory, as well as those applied in the formulas of the physics of relativity. So what does Euclidean geometry, physics and quantum mechanics have in common? Many would answer they all show an intelligent system. But that would be wrong. The correct answer is just a little different. What they all show is a highly coordinated system based upon coding and formulas that is not in itself an intelligent system, but rather one that was created by something intelligent. This is an important distinction that gives credit not to the reality itself, but to what is real beyond it. It isn't divine creation. It is a program reality based on light and information, with deliberate coding function. As we discovered earlier, a computer can never be aware of its creator. The original program on which our reality is based was created by those from beyond it. And if you are still with me, then I hope something inside you is waking up to the fact you do not belong here. No one who is real belongs here. And if you are questioning at this point why it is not possible that some kind of God has created all of this, creating all of the mathematical and intricate wonders of fractal geometry, consciousness, the etheric dimensions, and timeless space, Stay with me and I'll show you. Our research has taken us from the cosmic to the fundamental, and yet it is all one and the same. Elonias has spoken many times about the relationship of the energy of all things. As above, so below. This allows us to view the true value of energy within all things and within ourselves. What we see in the greater, so shall we see reflected in the lesser. Even the oldest symbols and mathematical relationships on the planet and within human cultures share a striking precision of numbers and geometry. We see repeating patterns of universal design reflected in the unparalleled precision from the Great Pyramids to computer bytes to chords of music. But within the illusion of this reality, all is illusion, not just some of it. This next section will be controversial to many, involving the wonders of design that depicts the very essence of the belief systems of many religions, the tetragrammaton. Commonly identified as this symbol and loosely pronounced Yahweh. It is long held to represent the unspeakable name of God, containing numerical derivatives of 12, 42, and 72 numbers, comprising its full value. But when we really look at the structure of reality, we see the references to 12, 42, 72, 144, 666, 777, 33, and beyond as all having fractal relationships to the whole. These fractal relationships in the program of creation are totally misunderstood when reduced to simplistic ideologies about an impossible creation or an absent God, in a world that just continues to deteriorate around us. Yahweh is not a name at all, it is a coding formula of light. Humanity's need to identify a personified image onto what they do not understand is understandable, but inaccurate. We all need love and we all need to believe in something greater, but this symbol is not the name of a god or any god, just as 666 is not the number of a devil. These are coding alignments to the opposing formulas of a creation program, revealing itself through number frequencies, the same way a sine wave dips into the positive and the negative and back to the center. Light filling life as a unifying factor of the energy of the one of all things. Number sequences that make sense when aligned to a greater whole, but not when ascribed to a single creator. But whilst God is a limited concept, light is not. Love is not. The power of what is real beyond the image of creation is not. In the beginning I said to you, the key to understanding the illusion of reality was awareness and experience. What I share is a result of communication from beyond this program. Deep inner experiences and powerful memories, relentless outward investigation, observation, pattern identification, logic and common sense. At this point, if I were you, I would perhaps be asking about the real. And I would answer you by saying, I have seen the real for myself many times. The first time I viewed the real was an experience I will always remember. The night of my birthday in 1997, when I was still a young man. I had moved to the hills east of Melbourne, out of the suburban sprawl. It was a night of festivity, laughter, good food and good company. A relaxing celebration with friends. Dinner was over and the usual thing happened. Several conversations broke out amongst the gathering of friends and it grew louder over time. The night was soon upon us, and I stepped outside onto the balcony that looked west across the trees, and wandered my gaze through the night sky at the stars and nebulae. There was no moon that night, so it was all very clear. I looked deeply into the night, and I wondered about so many things. My strongest thought was why I was so enthralled by the cosmos. More than just astronomy, it was something I knew. A longing, nostalgic feelings I could not explain, and yet had been with me my whole life. I remember what happened next like it was yesterday. I remembered asking myself if something had heard my thoughts, because the view of the night sky I was peering into began to shift. It was as if the constellations and the night sky itself were drawing me in. I did not feel like I was moving, I just felt everything was changing. The stars I had been watching started to phase out of view and were replaced with a view of stars in space I have never known. It felt alive. I could feel the stars. They were not the same stars. I recognized nothing, and yet everything was so familiar. The positions of the constellations were all different. If you can imagine what it would be like to look out at stars and to feel at one with what you saw, to feel their beauty, to hear a sound, to feel their energy. It was as if I had been looking at a picture of them my whole life, and now I had just stepped into the real thing. It was so vivid, trying to take it all in. I knew without a doubt I was experiencing a connection to what was real beyond my life, beyond all life, beyond the stars, beyond anything I had seen before. And just like so many other experiences we have had over the years, it started to recede. And soon enough I was left standing on the balcony, emotional, speechless, and so very aware, in shock. Whilst I had left the vivid experience behind me, I also now carried it with me, like an imprint of what is real within illusion. The experiences we have had showed me the impossible universe. They showed Diane how illusionary and limited this reality is. The way reality does not operate the way our senses are taught to believe it does. Elonias and the others have shown us the power of awakening to what is real over and over.